when we first started doing this, so this is me, Sean, and Dave doing the self-publishing podcast, there was a lot of instant success, or it felt like instant success, especially when KU was new. And there were a lot of people that were like, oh, I released my first book and I made $1 bazillion or whatever. And so then, of course, you get the comparisonitis where it's like, well, then I need to be able to do that. But that sort of instant success is increasingly rare. It's much, much harder to come by. And now I think that we're in this very sensible age where it feels slow or it feels discouraging to people, but it's actually normal.
Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week on the Indy Author podcast, I talk with Johnny B. Truant about the new normal of an author career, including the evolving landscape of self-publishing, the dilemma of comparisonitis, the need to accept slow growth in one's author career as the new norm, the value of patience, and the warning signs when patience turns into a rut. And now let's hear from Johnny B. Truant about the new normal of an author career. Hello, and welcome to the Indy Author podcast. Today, my guest is Johnny B. Truant. Hey, Johnny, how are you doing?
Hey, Matty, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. And to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Johnny B. Truant is the best-selling author of Fat Vampire, which I have my signed copy of Fat Vampire right here. Which was adopted,
sweet.
Yes, by the SyFy Network as Reginald the Vampire. His other books include Pretty Killer, Gore Point, Invasion, The Beam, Dead City, Unicorn Western, and over 100 other titles across many genres. Johnny is one of Indie Publishing's early authorities, having created and co-hosted the original self-publishing podcast with Sean Platt and David Wright. He's also the author of the Indie Cornerstone Guide, Write, Publish, Repeat, and hosted the Smarter Artist Summit Author Conference in Austin, Texas from 2015 to 2018 with the same two partners. And Johnny was last a guest on the podcast back at episode 239, Moving the Needle to a Different Track. And so the background of why I invited Johnny back on the podcast is a little while ago, I was watching one of the Author Nation after party videos, as they called them. They were follow-ons to presentations that presenters had given at Author Nation 2024. And Johnny was talking with Joe Solari, and something came up about the importance of bringing patience to an author career. As I recall, the context was you have to be patient about growing your author career. You have to be patient about building your readership, your fan base, and so on. So I just wanted to start out. We're going to take a little bit of a different twist on this in a little bit, but I was very interested in hearing you speak again about what is the role of patience in a successful author career?
I think that patience is, okay, so let me think how to say this, because it is something that's good to have, meaning like proactively being patient is going to lead to better things, which I can elaborate on in a minute. But I would also say that it's necessary in a reactive way, meaning that like things are going to happen that are going to not be great and you're not going to love it. And things aren't going to happen as fast. And if you aren't patient, then you don't get a second chance, right? So it's like there's like, let me take a long-term view, which is the way that I would kind of look at patience, let's say proactively. And then there's this sense of, well, yes, but if you don't, you're going to be in for a rough ride, because this is inherently, and I think that this is true more than ever, that this is a career where if you aren't patient, you're going to think that things aren't working. And I'm putting that in quotes, aren't working, because you have a different perception of what it is to work than kind of the universe or whatever. And I'm not trying to be woo-hoo there. It's just like that isn't the way that things necessarily work out. So that's my circuitous, I'm going to have it both ways sort of answer to that question.
So when you're saying that if you don't bring some patience to a situation, you might never get a second chance, can you give an example of how that might play out?
Well, certainly if you, I mean, I'd have to be I'm thinking of this one on the spot. So I'm going to give you kind of an extreme example. If you were talking about one of your books to somebody in person, okay, because this is just one of the easiest ones to imagine, and you push too hard. Like there are some kind of aggressive sales tactics that people will do where when somebody isn't at all interested in holding a book, you put the book in their hands, which sometimes is okay, sometimes it's pushy. And there's a very pushy way of doing that because you're impatient and you want to make the sale. Now, you can extrapolate this to like online sales as well. If you're just too pushy with your marketing or something like that, if you make somebody irritated, like there's a lot of other entertainment out there, there's a lot of other authors, and you don't want to alienate somebody that it might just take months or even years for them to come around and be interested in you. If you aren't cool with that, if you aren't willing to just kind of understand that relationships take time and not everybody is on your timetable, then you can ruin a relationship that might have been otherwise on the right track.
I'm thinking that there's also an aspect where comparisonitis is sort of contributing to impatience, because you read about some milestone some other author has achieved, some goal that they've achieved, and it encourages one to hurry up to match whatever that achievement is. Do you see that connection
100%.
with comparisonitis?
100%. And I think that comparisonitis is kind of never good. It's kind of a soul killer. I think that that's the sort of thing that, because yes, patience, like you could be like, you need to be patient, but I'm not patient because I'm comparing myself to somebody else who did something or other. But it's like, you can't compare their path to your path. They might be a totally different kind of author. They might be lying or self-aggrandizing or deluded. I remember hearing somebody tell a story about somebody who thought that they were a certain income level of an author, and they were quite surprised to learn that they very much weren't, because their expenses were so high, and for some reason, the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. So yeah, the more you compare, like comparison is the enemy of any sort of, satisfaction or self-worth, because immediately you're like, oh, I did this thing. Oh, but it's not as good as this other person. So yeah, I can absolutely see that being, I'd better hurry up. I'd better do better. I mean, there's positives to that in a weird way. Like you can use it as EU stress to try to drive you forward, but that's not how most people do it. Most people beat themselves with it.
Yeah. And I think that the other aspect of patience I'm hearing here is that there's patience with oneself, and then there's patience with others. So, I think that some of what we're talking about here is the importance of bringing patience and kindness to yourself. And then there's also this expectation that readers should find you faster than they're finding you, or they should interact with you more than they're interacting with you. So can you talk a little bit about that when maybe you project an impatience onto the people that you're trying to connect with?
Well, that was actually, the session that you are referring to with Joe was probably the one where we were talking about the orienteering approach to finding your 1,000 true fans, which is kind of a fancy way of saying that they are going to find their own way through your world. And your world can be your marketing world too. It doesn't mean like literally your story world. In other words, from meeting you the first time to buying something from you, that journey, they're going to take their own path through that. But what most authors say is, well, no, hold on a second. I have a 7-part autoresponder sequence that branches here and here, and they need to follow that path. And then when they're ready to buy, they better be ready to buy by email 8 or something like that. And that's just not the case. I forget the thread of the question. I went off on one of my I'm going to tell you the story. What am I even close to answering it?
The threads are the best part of the conversations. Yeah, that idea that you become impatient about the people that you're interacting with.
Yeah.
You're not bringing kindness and patience to the other people either, which can be just as damaging as not bringing kindness and patience to yourself.
Yes. And I would also say that kind of an underappreciated aspect of this whole thing is that it's not like, okay, so let's say I start an ad, a Facebook ad or something like that. Then there's a way in which you need to be patient before the ad will kind of find its feet. I'm just using an ad as an example, but any tactic at all. But then there's another aspect where maybe it's not ads, right? Like maybe your bigger picture is success or reaching a certain number of sales or a certain number of fans. It's the one avenue could fail entirely. Like you don't have to be patient with that necessarily. Like that could be that's gone, or patient with an entire career. I think that this is less true than it used to be when we first started doing this. So this is me, Sean, and Dave doing the self-publishing podcast. There was a lot of instant success, or it felt like instant success, especially when KU was new. And there were a lot of people that were like, oh, I released my first book and I made $1 bazillion or whatever. And so then, of course, you get the comparisonitis where it's like, well, then I need to be able to do that. But that sort of instant success is increasingly rare. It's much, much harder to come by. And now I think that we're in this very sensible age where it feels slow or it feels discouraging to people, but it's actually normal. The things that have worked about sales and marketing and having products and working with customers haven't changed since people were talking about this in self-help books, decades and decades and decades ago. It's just that we have become accustomed, especially in the internet age, especially as authors who are able to see these real fast successes, to feeling that the normal pace is bone-breakingly slow. But it's not. It's just normal. It's not normal for somebody to expect their business to be profitable in the first year. We do expect that. What's the statistics? Most businesses lose money for 3 or 4 years before they make money. And without any awareness of that, we don't have patience to get through it because we think we need to be successful right away. I'm outlining a book right now called The Artisan Author that's based on the other talk that I did at Author Nation. And I'm realizing that so much of that philosophy as a whole is really boring. And it's because there's no whiz-bang tactics. It's like connect with people, create good stuff. I mean, there's obviously more detail than that, but it's almost like I don't feel like I have anything to say anymore because I don't believe in a lot of the things that people used to seize on as like, this is the one way to do it. And instead, it's like, well, I'm sorry, you got to put in the time. You got to think like a real business. You need to understand that you have some expenses. You got to understand that profit is going to be, you're going to have good days and bad days, or good months and bad months, or good years and bad years. These are all realities of normal businesses that we've thought that we're immune to, and we're just not. I think a sane business as an author keeps those expectations in mind. And you just know that that's kind of what you might need to deal with.
Yeah, I can imagine that the way people will use the artisan author book is, as opposed to a book, let's say they get a book about ad tactics or something like that. They're going to read it and then they're going to keep it by their desk. And then when they need to be reminded about whether to pay for cost per click or cost per thousand, they'll pick it up and they'll refer to that. But I can imagine that people will use that book they'll read it, they'll absorb the message, and then they'll have it next to their desk when they just need a reminder of the more overarching, strategic, and holistic way they should be pursuing that effort.
Yeah. It's funny, this may be a little bit sideways, but you said you enjoyed the thread, so here we go.
Yeah.
I was so I've avoided social media like entirely. I just don't like it. But recently, I've dipped my toe into Reddit a little bit, just because like the certain parts of Reddit seem like they're maybe a little bit more like the old social media that I used to like. Well, like I used to be in forums and stuff. And so anyway, I was responding to somebody who was asking about returns on Ingram. So for people who don't know, if you offer your book through Ingram, which is the people who like libraries and bookstores and so forth buy from, if you want to have any real chance of those bookstores stocking your book, you need to make your books returnable. Basically, it means that they're able to get them on consignment and turn around and give them back. And it causes a lot of fear. Like a lot of authors are like, they hear these horror stories of getting thousands of copies ordered and then they're returned or destroyed, or they have a huge shipping bill because they want them shipped to them. And first of all, I think that's a quality problem. Like if a bookstore is ordering thousands of copies of your book, you probably are doing some things right. I've never had a bookstore order thousands of copies, so I'm not worried about that. But one of the things that I got off onto when I was discussing with this person who asked this question was it feels like one of the things that people don't talk about in this field is that when you're an author, you're running a little business, you're a solopreneur or maybe a little entrepreneur if you have a few people working with you. And the mentality of a business person, an entrepreneurial sort of business person, does not overlap very strongly with the mentality of most authors. And so authors go into this I don't think they totally understand that they're creating a little business. And if they do understand, they don't make the mental leap to, therefore, I need to treat it like a business. And I need to understand that there's a business here. And that this issue of the returnability on Ingram, to me, is just like, what people do is they just don't put their books on Ingram, which like, okay, maybe you don't sell any books there. It's fine. I get it. But you're going to cut off the possibility to enter that largest realm of print books because of fear. And I get that. But this guy had said like, well, part of it's psychological. If somebody returns your books, it's like this invalidation of your worth as an author because somebody took my books and they didn't like them, so they gave them back. But that's where I raise this business issue. And it's like, okay, I get that. That does suck. There is an emotional component here. But that's not how a business makes decisions. Like a business says, I'm going to take a calculated risk, or I'm not going to take a risk because I just don't think it's worth it. They don't say, well, somebody might not like this widget that I created, right? So I don't know. That's something that's been on my mind a lot recently, is that we do make this thing that is very personal for us, and there is a huge art component to it. But if you don't make business-like decisions, your business is not going to work like a normal business.
Well, that is a great segue to the question that popped into my head when I was listening to you and Joe Solaro talk in the after party, which is that I think that I have, and I'm sure many other authors have, sort of the opposite problem, that I feel like I'm too patient. And in this way, I'm talking about things like ads. Ads is a perfect example. I'll stick with an ad or stick with a social media platform or stick with a whatever you fill in the blank much longer that in retrospect, like years later, I'll say, oh yeah, I should have stopped doing that like 6 months earlier. And so as we're putting on the business hat and not the creator hat or not the writer hat, do you see red flags? Are there signals that you see when somebody's maybe lapsing too far into being too patient problem?
Yeah. So what this brings to mind to me is Seth Godin wrote a book called The Dip. And The Dip is, I think that the little tagline, I don't know if he uses it all the time, it's something like a little book about quitting. Like it's something like that that's in the tagline for it. And what that means is that the dip refers to the time when things aren't working before they maybe take off. And what Seth argues is that you should probably bail on more things than you stick with. And that kind of like dogged determination to stick with something is like, that's a failure of the dip, basically. So what that means is you kind of have to know what to quit. And if an ad isn't working and you have enough experience to know that the ad isn't working, you should quit that ad. You should stop. Now, if you're new to ads like I am, I have lost a whole crap load of money on ads recently because I don't know what I'm doing yet. And it really sucks because I'm just not making any money on them, but I'm continuing to throw my money away. That feels like education for me. Like I'm willing to take those risks. But if you're seasoned and something isn't working, you need to bail. And I think that the tendency to not bail on certain things that are not working and are apparently not working, that are apparent that they're not working, it's a sunk cost thing. It's gambler's mentality almost sometimes. Or it's a complacency and a fear to move on and try something else. Oh, it really took me a long time to make myself do this social media and I got really invested and now I can't admit to myself that it's not worth my time. And I don't know how successfully I've juggled the quitting versus being patient, like seesaw, but I feel like I've done a fair job of it because I just don't tolerate, I'm just really impatient with that. It's funny that I just said impatient, but I'm impatient with like things that I don't like extra baggage, right? So there's only so much time, that's the point of the dip, is that there's only so much time and attention that you have. And so the more time you spend on things that aren't working, and it's clear that they aren't working, the less energy and time and money you will have for the things that do work. So this is like that classic Pareto principle, 80-20 rule, is that 20% of the things you do are going to generate 80% of your results. But what most people tend to do is, well, hold on. I know that this is generating very small results, but I guess I can just leave it. And what that's doing is it's sapping your attention. It might be sapping your income or your costs. It's certainly sapping just mental bandwidth. And I'm a firm believer in trimming down to that 20% that does work. And so I think that when you say, when is it best not to be patient? To me, that is that dip, like, let's analyze what actually is working and has the potential to work. And let's look at what doesn't. And then even if you love that other thing, chances are you should probably quit it if you want to be most efficient.
Yeah, I'm seeing this play out for myself with ads. So if we look across, sort of the big couple of Facebook ads, Amazon ads, and BookBub ads, I always have like auto Amazon ads running at a tiny amount all the time. I tried Facebook ads for a while. I just hated it. I hated the UI. I becoming increasingly disillusioned with social media. I just stopped doing that. But BookBub ads I like, despite the fact that I haven't figured it out yet. But I just, the user interface is easy to use. I have this feeling that I want to be where people are actually shopping for books as opposed to where people are looking for cute cat videos. So it makes sense to me. I think, BookBub is very well run and appealing. It's something that I consume as a reader as well as an author. So I like it from that point of view. And I could fiddle endlessly with BookBub because I feel like I'm just one experiment away from cracking the code and figuring out what's going to work. And so it's, pulling back from the things that I'm actually enjoying is not surprisingly much more difficult than pulling back from the things that I don't enjoy. And plus, I feel like, well, I have to be doing something. Like, I can't just expect people to happen upon my books. And so I feel like I need to be running ads. But how much money do you want to sink into BookBub ads before you think, well, okay, maybe I am just gonna hope somebody stumbles over it.
That's the question, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Like knowing when to quit. I feel like I'm fortunate because I tend to like things that work and I tend to not like things that don't work. Like those line up really well. So it's fairly easy for me to be like, well, this isn't any fun. because it's not working. So I'm going to quit. But like social media, it's similar. Like I had a social media presence back in the day. I was on Twitter back when it was Twitter. I didn't do a lot on Facebook, but I know we experimented with a fair amount of social media. But I was just like, I hate it. Okay. I hate it. I hate being here. I hate spending time here. I don't think it's really doing anything for me. And in some of those venues, like I think social media is definitely one, if you don't like it, chances are you're not fooling anybody. Your readers know you don't like it. So it's not going to be effective.
Yeah. I think that there's also the aspect that, at some point I just thought, even if social media were the place where I'm going to be making my millions, I probably still wouldn't do it because, it just becomes so distasteful to me. And there's that trade-off of, you're weighing not only the financial benefits, but the mental health benefits as well when you're deciding what to stick with and what not to stick with.
Right. Yeah. So actually, my experiment into Reddit, which is very, very new, is I specifically searched around for well-moderated, non-toxic subreddits. Because for the mental health thing, like if I have to go in and I have to see a bunch of stuff that like triggers and alarms me, it's not worth it no matter how much I'm doing.
Yeah. And I guess the other way that I justify the time I spent on BookBub, and we can decide if this is legitimate or not, is that I love doing the ads. And I think, well, in the worst possible circumstance, I'm getting a sense of, at a minimum, I'm getting a sense of what comp authors I thought I had that aren't actually comps.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like some of the things I'm learning by doing the visual design for the ads, I can carry forward to other things. But, at some point, you're really scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of justifying something from a business point of view.
Yeah, it is funny because I think that everything has, if you're honest, you can find that certain things are giving you value in some way, shape, or form, or they're not. So when you were talking about the ads, I mean, I like to tinker and optimize. So as much money as I've lost on ads, I'm not dissuaded at all because I know that people do them successfully. And I know that I'm usually pretty good at that sort of thing, like the psychological hooks and marketing in general. So I want to figure it out. But my best source of market research recently has been selling in person. And that's a really interesting form of market research because you get to watch people in real time. And if they pick up a book and they're intrigued and then they turn it over and they read the back and they're like, oh, like that tells you something that you wouldn't necessarily know if they were shopping on Barnes & Noble or something like that. Yeah. Or you notice what, because it is about covers. Like for anybody who doesn't know this yet, sorry, people judge book by their covers. Like I would spend a fortune on a cover before I'd spend it on anything else. But you see which covers people gravitate toward. And it's surprising. So like Fat Vampire, my biggest seller, it sells the least in person. Go figure. I'm glad you liked it. And people do like it, obviously. Like it's sold really well. But in person, for some reason, it's just not magnetic. And so like I have a couple of other books, which I would show you if I haven't, but I don't. But like Pretty Killer is this wonderful like thriller. It just has this beautiful cover of like this lower half of a woman's face and a fork, and it says revenge is served. So like that one attracts people all day long.
Yeah.
And just go figure. And you'll notice that what pitches work and what pitches don't work. Like it's really interesting to give you an idea. I know that we're way off track, but
I'm having fun. If you're having fun.
Yeah, I'm having fun. I'm good. So another title that sells really well for me in person is Unicorn Western. And I sell it in this big omnibus. It's 716 pages at 6x9. So it's enormous. And people immediately bug eyes at that cover. It's this illustrated cover of an old, like a Clint Eastwood style gunslinger riding a unicorn. And it's got this big rainbow background. It's really magnetic. And what I've learned now, when people are curious about that, I say, so a reader once told me that it's like if Stephen King were on LSD when he wrote The Dark Tower. And it always gets a laugh. And that's a great tagline. And I could only learn that by trial and error, which interestingly is the sort of thing you can learn through click testing with your BookBub ads. So that to me is about being patient and not exhausting possibilities before that you might find the magic ingredient. You might find the best image and the best tagline and the best description that suddenly sell it, but you just haven't found it yet because you gave up too early.
I like the idea also of not going into in-person sales events with a goal of selling things, but instead going into it with the goal of gaining market research, because it sort of takes some of the stress out of it. Like at the end of 2024 and into 2025, I just said, I'm just not doing it anymore because, the time I invest in packing up my books and going to the event, unpacking and blah, 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 I felt I could spend it more profitably in another way. But exactly what you're saying is great about market research. It's another reason that I continue to do like Facebook group author takeovers, because it's a great way to chat with people. If you show up in a group and you say, oh, my book has ghosts in it, and everybody says, I don't read anything with ghosts, and it's useful information to have, even if you're not going to be making any sales as a result of that event.
Yeah, I think this is a case where knowing yourself and knowing that not everybody wants the same things is really useful. So this is true here's something that's true of me with live sales. So I love live sales, and I only learned them, it's been 6 months since I did my first live event. It was Rave in 2024 for Author Nation. So previous to that, I was just kind of having a malaise, a writer's funk. And I was talking to my wife about it. And this is a longer story that I'll shorten. She just said, oh, you're lonely. That's what it is. And I have this extrovert side to me that a lot of writers don't. It's true that if I'm not able to interact with people enough, I have learned, and this was a surprise, that that's a problem. And so that feeds a part of me that even if I didn't make any sales, it's valid. Now, that said, I can try to do those mental gymnastics. Oh, I'm just here for market research. Oh, I'm just here to be an extrovert. And then if I don't sell any books, I'm still mad. So that is a thing. I do need to sell some books. But that is a huge benefit to me that would not necessarily be a benefit to anybody else. And so if somebody took my advice, I'm not giving that as advice, but if somebody saw that as advice and decided to implement it, they would be disappointed if they're like a writer who is like most writers and doesn't want to be out in public and doesn't want to be in the spotlight. Whereas I love the spotlight.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to take this somewhere where that is a little more serious than I had in mind when we started this conversation, but you had said something about, I think, patience with a career.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to just talk a little bit about patience with a career. At what point, what are the red flags that would say that somebody maybe needs to step back and take a look at their career as a whole, not specific aspects like are ads right for me or in-person sales right for me?
You mean, should they throw in the towel? Is it time?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's one way to make that decision. I know that for me, this is going to sound like this is going to have some bravado to it. And I don't intend that. It's just true. I don't give up. I just can't. It matters too much to me. And I think that's a perfectly valid thing. You just have to know. I'm resisting the urge to tell another metaphorical side story.
Go ahead.
Which I do all the time. Okay. So I'll tell it because you gave me permission. So I'll try to keep it short. So I had a friend, his name was Rob, and I liked Rob a lot, but Rob was the most unreliable person in the world. If you were like, I'm going to meet you at noon at the Stop and Shop, that was the one place and time that Rob would never be there. You just couldn't count on him. And I used to get so mad until I kind of realized, and I said, you know what? He's not going to change. So I have a decision to make. Either I'm done with Rob and I'm not going to ever see him again because he's making me too mad, or I have to be the person who just accepts that that's how he is, and I'm always going to be disappointed in that particular way. And so applying that to your career is if things aren't working and you're stubbornly insisting that you continue on like I would, then there would be a point where I would need to kind of look myself in the eye and say, okay, you're deciding to continue this, right? Yes, I'm going to continue it. You know that you've made it clear that you're not going to be successful at it in the way that you were thinking, right? You're going to sell less. You're going to be doing it for hobbyist reasons. You're going to be doing it for self-expression. And at that point, I think that I would still continue to do it because it's just how I'm wired. But there are plenty of other people who it's well, I'm not getting out of this what I wanted. It's no knock on my artistic integrity, but this does have to be profitable. I think that that's very fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with insisting that you be profitable, even if you just want to express yourself. Because it's time that you may need to spend for something else. You may have a family that you want to spend more time with, or you need to go work your other job or something else. And if the writing isn't paying for itself, then for a whole lot of people, that might not be something that you can justify, holistically. So it's a personal decision, but I do think that just comes with honesty and with asking some version of the question, what am I likely to actually get out of this? And is that enough? Like knowing that in the my friend Rob way, knowing that I'm not going to there's no scenario where I get to be a millionaire. So do I get to do it for artistic expression, or do I want to say I'm not doing this anymore? And so I guess that's the non-answer answer as to how I would suggest approaching that.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said this. I probably wouldn't say it, except I think it's already slipped out in a previous podcast episode. So I'll say it again, that I did realize, at some point looking back on my career, that when I'm faced with, there are two choices. One is the one that makes me happier as a creator, and one is the one that's going to make me the most money. I will almost always go to the happier as a creator option, because, you hear all the stories about the person who, modified the plot of their story because somebody advised them that they had to do it to meet genre expectations or what have you. And then they sort of lost the flame that had attracted them to that. And I just decided at some point the way I'm going to deal with that is I'm not going to be looking to my book sales as the way I'm going to be paying the bills. I'm going to be looking to the other streams of author income, the other writing adjacent things like speaking or consulting or teaching and so on, to give me the ability to continue making the decisions that make me happy and not the ones that necessarily make me more money. But that's kind of a tough pill to swallow, I think.
It is. And I can relate to that so much. I'm not able to sell out. I have tried. I've tried, like, it's a little tongue in cheek, but my writing partner, Sean, and I we're like, we're going to sell out this time. And it never works because we're just, as a pair, we're so like pure creators that it's like we can adhere to the things that make something really super commercial for like a minute. And then if there's a sequel to that book, then it goes wildly off the rails. Invasion was that way. Our series Invasion, the first was like, we're going to write something that's so page turny, like people are just going to be like salivating for the next page. And then by the second book, it was already getting into all sorts of like layered conspiracy, weird stuff. And that's the reason I'm multi-genre. Like, that's the reason I don't have one genre, is because I would be so much more successful if I could just write page-turning thrillers or page-turning horror or, one thing that I got known for. But I can't do it. Like, it's the creative expression matters so much. But I think that's okay now. I think that's okay now much more than it used to be.
I think it's also helpful if you can segment things out. So I have two series. I have 5 in one, 6 in the other. Pretty soon there'll be 6 in both. And, both of those, the first book of the first series came out in 2013. The first book of the second series came out in 2016. So, I was still pretty early in my author career, very happy with those. But I'd set expectations about, like, this is a book about a woman who can talk to dead people. But it's not like very paranormal, so it doesn't, appeal to the very paranormal fans. But it has ghosts in it, so it doesn't appeal to the people who don't like ghosts in their stuff. But at that point, I had created my world, and I wasn't going to change it just to make it more a center of genre. But I'm working on a standalone now, and it's very freeing. First of all, it's very freeing because it's a standalone, so I don't have to worry about what happened in the last 4 books, and does this still make sense? But I went into it very intentionally, like, I'm going to make this center of genre. I'm going to put whatever people recommend is the right cover for it. If I have to change the plot, I'm going to change the plot to make it more saleable. And because I went into it with that expectation, I don't feel like I'm selling out. I'm still having great fun with it because I'm making those choices intentionally. I'm not kind of having them forced on me. So, yeah, so many mindset things. We've wandered far afield from patience and impatience, but so many important parts of the author life.
Yeah. That's funny. I think that that's a good point about deciding in advance. So, I'm obviously being a little facetious about Invasion being selling out. It was a lot of fun to work within those constraints. And I think that it was a great, it's one of my favorite, well, I like all my books, but it's one of my favorite books because it's just like, it became exactly what it was supposed to be. I think that the reason I paused there is because I think that when it sucks is when you didn't set out with that intention and you created something with one idea in mind and you feel that you were successful. Like, you created that perfect thing that was in your heart, or a story went just the way that you wanted. And then you decide that you have to change it, or you're halfway in and you're like, well, this isn't commercial enough. Let me make this trope happen. And it's artificial. But working within a set of fences that you create to begin with, I think, is wonderful creative fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I also have a goal of coming up with some other word than hobbyist, because I don't know a better word than hobbyist writer, but there should be.
Artisan.
Hey, there's an idea. I didn't even set that up on purpose. Yes, exactly. And I guess that the reason I didn't go there right away is that there's that idea, I think, that an artisan is in it both for the making a living at it, the artistic part and the making a living at it is the expectation I bring to the term artisan.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're doing it strictly for the love of the activity, yeah. Well, there's food for thought. And
I have so much more to say
book.
there, but we'll need another session for that. Yeah.
Well,
no,
we
I
should
totally
have
agree.
another session. When your book comes out, I would love to. I mean, I've heard you speak about the artisan author, and you have so many great things to say about it. So I'm going to be very curious when the book comes out.
Yeah, that'd be cool. It's, I mean, I don't, not to go off on too much, but I just increasingly feel that we're splitting down the middle as authors. You can keep doing the thing where you just try to overproduce. You try to produce as fast as you can and try to stay one step ahead of the spider. But if you can't do that, or you don't want to do that, or that's not in your nature, it just doesn't light you up, then I think this is the only other way to go. Because people are looking to connect with individual people, the passion and the humanity that birthed that art ends up mattering more than the story itself, basically. I mean, I think it matters maybe just as much. But yeah, you're an artisan.
Well, that's a lovely point to end on until we get together again to talk more about artisan authorship. So, Johnny, thank you again for another great conversation. And please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and everything you do online.
I'm at johnnybtruantbooks.com. I do have a pre-order for The Artisan Author. It's at johnnybtruant.com/artisan. And other than that, I don't know. I'm here. I'm a podcast guest. What else can I say?
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Johnny. Have you ever felt discouraged by the slow progress of your creative projects? How do you stay motivated when success doesn't come immediately? I would love to hear your thoughts. Just leave a comment on YouTube. And if you got value from the podcast and were thinking, I wish I could buy Matty a cup of coffee, you can do that. Scroll to the bottom of any page at theindyauthor.com and click Buy Me a Coffee. Until next time, here's wishing you favorable winds and smooth sailing on your creative voyage.